For the Arizona Cardinals, last year, their 2023 just went as you expected because they're missing their starting quarterback and Kyler Murray for half of the year. And before he came back, it was a little bit of, evaluating your young players. You're going through a quarterback in Josh Dobbs that, he tried to guide them, but it didn't really amount to much. But once Kyler Murray came back and he was back to pre-ACL tear form, which was a good thing for Arizona. And even though they ended their season with the same record as they did the year prior, 4-13, they did end with multiple young players showing promise. And they got 2 upset wins over 2 playoff contenders that would eventually fall in the playoffs, like pretty badly. So for the Arizona Cardinals, you wanted to go into 2024 to try and improve on the last 2 years of misfortune. And that's pretty much your goal for this year. Because looking back at this past offseason, you didn't have to worry so much about any drama surrounding quarterback issues with Kyler Murray, like a contract extension or some weird clause where, you have to do your homework, pal, or any head coaching searches or general manager searches. So for the first time in quite some time, Jonathan Gannon and the Red Birds in the desert finally got to focus on building their team for the upcoming season. So some of the things that I was hoping the Arizona Cardinals would do this past offseason was, they had to rebuild around the receiving room because the talent around Kyler Murray or whoever was at quarterback, there wasn't really a lot because all you had was James Conner. He was pretty much the engine of that whole offense. And time again, you would have Trey McBride. That was pretty much it. That was pretty much your whole offense. And then defensively, you needed to have either another defensive lineman, but also there's some concerns on that offensive line as well. So those are the things that I was hoping Arizona would address this past offseason. So looking at those offseason moves that Arizona addressed, looking at their free agent moves, they honestly didn't really lose a whole lot. Like Marquise Hollywood Brown to the Kansas City Chiefs. When you look at Marquise's time during Arizona, it really didn't amount to much because I was really hoping that Kyler Murray and Marquise Hollywood Brown would be a nice connection, but it just didn't pan out. Rondale Moore went to the Falcons. Another receiver 3 he showed some flashes, but it didn't really amount to much. And then defensively, Antonio Hamilton went to the Falcons as well. So again, you didn't really lose a lot if you were the Arizona Cardinals with so much money to spend, and they spent to a degree. You got an offensive lineman in Jonah Williams, center Evan Brown from the Seahawks, and then on the defensive trenches, you got Bail Nichols from the Raiders, Justin Jones from the Bears. So some kind of rotational players. And then in the secondary, you got Sean Murphy Bunting from the Titans. So a big get for a Cardinals secondary that really sucked in the passing defense. But at least you get a veteran presence now in that area. Especially when you look at the draft, you get Max Milton from Rutgers and Elijah Jones from Boston College in the later rounds of the draft. So you could build around a trio there. And then the biggest move that they made in the draft was obviously the one that most people were expecting, and that was with the 4th overall pick, receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State. So basically, Arizona addressed their obvious yet biggest need in top receiver in this offseason because, like I said, they were severely lacking in talent, and they're still severely lacking with help around Kyler Murray. And they still need to address some parts of it. Getting a number 1 receiver for Kyler Murray was the biggest must because he's been severely lacking that since, I believe, DeAndre Hopkins. And I forgot. But anyway, I had a blank there. But anyway, getting a receiver like Marvin Harrison Jr., who was a stud for Ohio State, he was a good get. But they still have some work to do. They still have some work to do, especially defensively. They have potential, but they do have some glaring concerns, like in the front 7, where they still have a middling pass rush despite drafting Darius Robinson at edge rusher. Other than that, they don't really have a whole lot in that pass rushing department. But on the other side, on the other end of it, the back half of it, like I said, with drafting Max Melton and Elijah Jones, and then you add a veteran presence in Sean Murphy Bunting, who won a Super Bowl with the Bucs, they could form a nice back half alongside your safeties that were already good Buda Baker and Garrett Williams. So this Arizona team, it's going to be competitive. It's going to be a fighting bunch, especially when you look at their key games this season where they really have to prove themselves. And that already proves that with their week 1 date with the Buffalo Bills. They have to travel to upstate New York to face the Bills. And yeah, the Bills are in a little bit of a phase, but you still have to play Josh Allen, who's going to be always going to be a rough go. And then you come home to face Matthew Stafford in the Rams in the following week. And then the next week, you get a date with the Detroit Lions, the conference semifinalists from last year. And then probably one of your other key games within the division comes 2 weeks later when you have to travel to San Francisco to face the 49ers. So for the Arizona Cardinals, some of my biggest questions for them going into this season has to be, who's going to be the other guy that's going to help out Marvin Harrison Jr. At receiver, because teams are going to be picking on, they're trying to do their best to double team or like put their best corner on Marvin Harrison Jr. So who's going to be that number 2 or number 3 that's going to be opposite of him? Because you can't always rely on Trey McBride. You can't always rely on Greg Dortch, because don't get me wrong, they were consistent producers last year. James Conner, he's been pretty good too, but he hasn't always been able to stay healthy. But their supporting cast needs to step up outside of those 3. And of course, now you have Marvin Harrison Jr. So who's going to be that guy? And then for Kyler Murray, speaking of staying healthy, can he stay healthy for a full season? Because he hasn't been able to do that since he came into the league in 2019. And now that he's coming off a torn ACL in the second half of 2022, he looked good. He looked good coming back in the second half of 2023, despite a poor supporting cast. And he should hope, and Arizona should hope, that he'll be better with more ample talent around him and a full offseason to prepare now. So they did a good job filling up some of their major flaws from last year. There's still some things to address, like how are they gonna address the pass rush? How's that gonna look? Who's gonna be that number 2 or 3 receiver behind Marvin Harrison Jr. that's gonna be that running mates? But I think Arizona's gonna be a fighting bunch with the group of young players that they have. And while they may not be there quite yet in terms of being against the Rams and the 49ers yet, I think the Arizona Cardinals, they could give a run for their money, run for teams' money this coming season. We'll just see how they'll do. And granted, if Kyler Murray can stay healthy.